The day my sister's wedding planner called me Ms. Calloway in front of my entire family, my mother's champagne glass slipped right out of her hand. She didn't drop it dramatically, it just slipped, like her grip on the version of me she'd spent 30 years constructing. I want to tell you that moment felt like victory, but honestly, standing there in the lobby of the Ashwood Grand, watching the color drain from my mother's face, I mostly just felt tired and a little sad, and underneath all of that, something that wasn't quite relief, but was close enough to it that I didn't know what else to call it. Let me back up. My sister Jade is 3 years younger than me, and she has been the center of our family's universe for as long as I can remember, not because she was kinder or smarter or more interesting, but because she was louder, more decorative, better at performing the version of a daughter my parents wanted to display. I'm Ren, and for most of my life, I was just the furniture. My parents weren't cruel. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this kind of story can go, and I don't want to paint them as villains when the truth is more ordinary and, in some ways, worse. They weren't cruel, they were just selective. Their attention was a limited resource, and Jade absorbed nearly all of it, the way a plant near a window pulls all the light from the room. When Jade was 12, she wanted horseback riding lessons. Our parents signed her up at a private stable 40 minutes outside of town, drove her every Saturday for 3 years, bought her custom boots and a velvet helmet, and eventually half a horse. They co-owned it with another family of the stable. I remember asking, around that same time, if I could take a pottery class at the community center. $14 a session. My mother said we'd look into it. We never did. When I was 16 and Jade was 13, she cried because she didn't get the lead in the school musical. My parents took her out for dinner to console her. I got a B+ on a chemistry exam that I had studied 3 weeks for. Our teacher said it was the second highest grade in the class, and I showed my father the paper and he said, "Good. Keep it up," and went back to watching television. I stopped showing them things after that. The thing about growing up invisible is that you develop skills the visible kids don't. You get very good at being quiet, at watching, at figuring out systems and patterns without anyone handing you a guide, at doing things alone because there's no one offering to help you. I got a full academic scholarship to a state university 3 hours away. My parents said they were proud. They took Jade shopping for a dress she needed for some event that weekend. I drove myself to campus with 2 suitcases and a desk lamp I bought at a garage sale. I studied computer science. I was good at it, not because I was some genius. I wasn't, but because I was willing to sit with hard problems for a very long time, which turns out to be most of what the job requires. I did internships. I networked. I was terrified most of the time, but I did it anyway because there was no fallback. No one waiting to catch me if I didn't. I graduated, got a job at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, worked there for 4 years, got promoted twice, switched to a better company, got promoted again. Started investing early because a coworker mentioned index funds in the break room during my first week and I went home and read about them for 6 hours. Started putting the maximum into my 401k the first year I was eligible. Bought a small condo when I was 26. I didn't tell my parents about the condo, not because I was hiding it, but because I knew they wouldn't ask. Meanwhile, Jade's life was, by her own account, not going so well. She had dropped out of a communications degree after 2 years, citing stress, and moved back home. She worked, intermittently, at various jobs that never quite stuck. A boutique, a real estate office, a wellness studio that closed after 8 months. My parents paid her car insurance. They covered her phone plan. When she wanted to travel to Cancun for spring break with friends, my father transferred money into her account without being asked. I knew this because Jade posted about it on Instagram with the caption, "Best parents ever." Some of us are just lucky like that. I remember staring at that post for a while. I thought about the pottery class. I put my phone down and went for a run. The loan happened when I was 28. My parents called me, which was unusual in itself. And my father explained that they were having some cash flow issues. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. What he asked was whether I could help them cover a shortfall on a home equity line of credit they'd taken out. The payment was coming up, and they were temporarily between liquid assets, his phrase, not mine. The amount was $18,000. I had it, and I want to be honest about why I said yes. because I've thought about it a lot since then. It wasn't purely generosity. Part of it was the oldest child wiring, the reflex to fix things, to be useful in the way I'd never quite been allowed to be in any other way. And part of it, a part I am not proud of, was the quiet hope that maybe this would change something, that being needed would translate into being seen. My father said they'd pay me back within 6 months. I drew up a simple promissory note, not because I didn't trust them. I don't know, maybe I didn't entirely, but because a coworker had told me once that money and family need paperwork to survive each other. My father signed it without reading it closely. My mother said I was being unnecessarily formal. They didn't pay it back in 6 months. At the 12-month mark, I sent a gentle email asking for an update. My mother called me to ask why I was stressing my father out. I apologized and said I wasn't trying to cause stress, just checking in. She said money talk was uncomfortable and she'd rather I not bring it up at the holidays. I didn't bring it up at the holidays. At 24 months, I had a real estate attorney, a woman named Colette, who I'd used when I bought the condo, send them a formal letter. Not aggressive, just a statement of the outstanding debt with accrued interest per the terms of the note and a request for a repayment schedule. My mother called me crying. My father got on the phone and said I was treating them like strangers. Jade texted me a string of messages calling me cold and calculating and saying that family didn't nickel and dime each other. I sat with my phone in my lap and thought about the horse, the partial horse, the custom boots. I didn't respond to Jade. I asked Colette to continue corresponding with him directly. That was also the year I made a decision that, at the time, felt slightly reckless, and now feels like the most logical thing I've ever done. I had been watching the commercial real estate market in my city for 2 years. Not seriously, just the way you watch something that interests you, and a small boutique hotel on the east side came up for sale. The Ashwood Grand, 22 rooms, a ballroom that seated 120, a rooftop terrace, a restaurant space that had been closed for 2 years. It needed work. The asking price was significantly below what comparable properties had sold for. I had savings, I had equity in the condo, and I had a very good credit score. I spent 6 weeks running numbers. I talked to 2 small business lenders. I talked to a hotel consultant who did a feasibility study. I talked to Colette for 4 hours on a Saturday. And then I made an offer. It was accepted. I didn't tell anyone in my family, not because I was planning some elaborate reveal. I genuinely wasn't. I just didn't have the habit of telling them things, and this felt too important to risk having minimized, and so I told my friends and my coworkers and my therapist, and I kept it very separate from that other part of my life. I spent the next year and a half renovating the Ashwood Grand with a property management company. I kept my tech job. I worked on the hotel in evenings and weekends and every vacation day I had. I hired a general manager, a woman with 15 years of boutique hotel experience who ran the day-to-day while I handled the business side. The hotel opened 8 months before Jade's wedding. Which brings me to the wedding. Jade got engaged to a man named Forrest, who sold insurance and collected vintage sneakers and had, as far as I could tell, a perfectly fine personality and no opinions about anything. She called me to share the news. I said congratulations and meant it. What I did not anticipate was the venue. My mother called me 3 weeks later, very excited, to tell me that Jade had found the most beautiful hotel for the reception. Small, boutique, exactly the aesthetic she wanted. They'd toured it that weekend. The ballroom was perfect. She described it in detail. I asked what the hotel was called. The Ashwood Grand, she said. Have you heard of it? It's Eastside. Newer renovation. The GM there, Simone. She's just wonderful. She went through the whole package with us. I sat very still on my couch. I've heard of it, I said. Jade is absolutely in love with it. They want to book the full weekend package. The rehearsal dinner Friday, the reception Saturday, the farewell brunch Sunday. It's not cheap, I'll tell you that. My mother laughed a little. Your father nearly had a heart attack at the number. But it's her wedding, you know. You only do it once. I thought about what to say for a moment. That sounds lovely, I said. Let me know when they finalize the booking. I did not say anything else. I called Simone the next morning and told her that the family booking the upcoming Saturday wedding were my relatives, that she was to proceed entirely normally, that I would attend the reception as a guest, and that she did not need to do anything differently on my account. I also quietly asked her to make sure that everything was absolutely perfect. The weeks before the wedding were ordinary. I bought a dress, I had my hair done. I drove to my hometown the Thursday before the wedding for a family dinner and sat at a table with my parents and Jade and Forrest's parents, and I listened to my mother and Jade talk about centerpieces and the seating chart and the photographer. And I ate my salad and asked appropriate questions and went back to my hotel room and stared at the ceiling for a while. At the rehearsal dinner Friday night, my aunt, my mother's older sister, Delphine, sat next to me and asked how work was going. Delphine had always been the family member who actually looked at me. She had driven 6 hours for my college graduation when my parents couldn't make it due to a scheduling conflict with Jade's dance recital. I told Delphine work was going well. "Are you still in tech?" she asked. "Partly," I said. "I've branched out a little." She waited for me to say more. I smiled and changed the subject. Saturday arrived clear and warm. I drove to the Ashwood Grand in my dress, parked in the side lot, walked through the east entrance. Simone met me near the kitchen corridor, our agreed-upon low-profile check-in, and confirmed that everything was running smoothly. The florals were done, the caterer was on schedule, the bar was set up. "It looks beautiful," I said, and I meant it. "It does," she agreed. "You should be proud." I thanked her and went to find my seat. The ceremony was at the venue next door, a small historic chapel that the hotel had a partnership with, and then, guests walked back to the Ashwood Grand for cocktail hour on the rooftop. I stood at the terrace railing with a glass of sparkling water and watched the city and thought about what it had cost me to get here, not in money, in the other currency. The years of being quiet, the years of doing things alone. The reception was beautiful. Jade cried during her vows. Forrest's voice broke twice. I sat at a table with Delphine and 2 of Jade's friends from college who were perfectly nice and talked mostly to each other. My parents floated through the room like they were the hosts. My father shook everyone's hand. My mother touched every centerpiece at least twice. It happened during the cocktail hour actually, before dinner, before the speeches. I had stepped into the lobby to cool down because the rooftop was warm and my shoes were starting to hurt. And I was standing near the front desk when one of the junior staff members, a young man I'd met once during a walkthrough, came out from the back and saw me. His face shifted into that particular expression that people have when they recognize someone they're supposed to recognize. "Miss Calloway," he said. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. Simone asked me to let you know the audio system in the ballroom is all checked and ready. And she wanted to confirm you're still happy with the extended bar service until midnight." He said it in a normal, professional tone, the way you talk to a property owner. I said yes, midnight was fine, please, thanks, Simone. He nodded and went back behind the desk. I turned around. My mother was standing 4 feet away from me. She was wearing the deep blue dress she'd had altered for the occasion. Her hair was done. She had a champagne flute in her right hand, and she was completely, utterly still. Behind her, coming through the lobby doors, was my father, and Jade, and Forrest, and Delphine, and Forrest's mother, and 3 of Jade's bridesmaids. They had all apparently been coming inside at the same moment. No one said anything for what felt like a long time. Jade's eyes moved from me to the front desk and back to me. Something was calculating behind them. "Why did he call you Ms. Calloway?" she said. I looked at her. My sister. In her beautiful dress, in this beautiful hotel, at this wedding my parents had spent money they didn't quite have on. "Because that's my name," I said. "Wren." My mother's voice was strange, thin. "What's going on?" I didn't perform it. I didn't set up a speech or draw it out. I was tired, my feet hurt, and I had made peace with this version of events months ago. So I just said it plainly, the same way I would have said anything else. "I own this hotel, Mom. I bought it 2 years ago. I renovated it. Simone runs it for me day to day." I paused. "It's a good property. I'm glad Jade chose it." My mother's champagne flute slipped out of her hand. It didn't shatter. It landed on the lobby carpet and just sort of tipped over. A small dark stain spread near her foot. My father said, "What?" Jade said nothing. Jade, for possibly the first time in her life, was completely silent. Delphine, from somewhere behind the group, let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. My mother stopped, started again. "How long have you, why didn't you tell us?" This was the question I'd thought about. I'd rehearsed different versions of an answer. In some versions, I was measured and calm. In some, I was pointed. In the one I actually used, I just told the truth. I've been telling you things my whole life, I said quietly. You just weren't listening. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. I looked at my father. He was doing the math. I could see it, the loan, the note, the attorney's letter, the fact that his younger daughter had just gotten married in a hotel owned by the daughter he'd dismissed as furniture. The debt, he said slowly. Colette is still handling that, I said. That's a separate thing. Tonight is about Jade's wedding. I meant it. I didn't say it to be magnanimous or to perform graciousness. I meant it practically, the same way I meant most things. Tonight was not the time or the place. Tonight my sister was getting married and the ballroom looked beautiful and the audio system was checked and the bar was running until midnight. I bent down and picked up my mother's champagne flute, handed it to a passing server, smoothed my dress. Dinner's probably starting soon, I said. We should go in. Delphine appeared at my elbow. She didn't say anything. She just walked beside me toward the ballroom doors, her hand briefly touching my arm. The dinner was served, the speeches happened. Someone told a story about Jade at 17 that made half the room laugh. Forrest looked at my sister the way people look at things they can't quite believe they get to keep. I ate my meal and drank my water, and watched the room I owned fill up with people who had never thought to ask what I was building. My mother came to find me during the father-daughter dance. She sat down next to me without asking, and for a while she didn't say anything. We both watched my father dance with Jade, who was crying again. The good kind. I didn't know, my mother finally said. I know. You should have told us. I turned and looked at her. My mother, who had never driven me to a lesson, who had never asked about my grade, who had said money talk was uncomfortable, who had not paid back $18,000 or acknowledged that it mattered. I needed to build something of my own, I said, somewhere no one could tell me it wasn't enough. She was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, she said. Ren, I know we didn't always. She stopped, started over. I'm sorry. I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, and it wasn't the end of anything complicated. But it was real, the way small, true things are real, and I let it sit there between us without doing anything to it. The band played something slow. Guests drifted onto the dance floor. Delphine found me near the end of the night, when the crowd had thinned and the bar was serving last call and the rooftop was closed and the night staff was quietly beginning their work. She hugged me, which she didn't always do. You built something real, she said. I tried to. Don't let them diminish it. She pulled back and looked at me. Not even now. Not even with apologies. You did this. You. I walked out through the side entrance at 11:30 before the formal end of the night and stood in the parking lot for a minute. The Ashwood Grand was lit up against the dark, the way it looked in the photos I'd taken the night renovations finished, when I'd stood in the empty ballroom alone and tried to understand what I'd done. The night manager, a quiet man named Paul who had been with the hotel since we opened, held the door for a group of guests leaving early. He nodded at me as they passed. Good night, Miss Calloway, he said. Good night, Paul. I got in my car. I sat there for a moment in the quiet. And then I drove home. Some people wait to be seen. They do the right things and they hope that eventually someone will turn around and notice. I understand that hope. I had it too for a long time. But at some point I stopped waiting and started building, and the building took so long and asked so much and was so completely mine. Every decision, every setback, every 6 a.m. call with the contractor, every spreadsheet, every sleepless night running projections, that by the time anyone else noticed, I had already stopped needing them to. That's the part they don't tell you about becoming the person you needed to be when you were younger. It doesn't feel like triumph. It mostly just feels like quiet, a particular kind of quiet that you have earned, that no one can take back, that belongs to you the way the building belongs to you. On paper, yes, but also in the other way, the way that matters more. I hope you know what I mean. And if you don't yet, you will. I've thought a lot about that moment in the lobby. My mother's champagne glass hitting the carpet, the slow spread of that dark stain near her foot, and the silence that followed. I used to imagine a moment like that when I was younger. Not that exact scene, but something like it. Some moment where the people who looked through me would finally have to look at me. I thought it would feel bigger. I thought I would feel something closer to satisfaction. What I actually felt was tired and a little sad. And underneath all of that, something quieter. Something that had been building for years and didn't need the audience to be real anymore. Here's what I've come to understand about the way things played out for me. Not everything works on a visible timeline. For a long time, I watched my sister Jade receive things I never got: attention, resources, assumption of potential. And I made a choice, mostly unconscious at first, to stop waiting for those things to be handed to me and start building my own version of them. That choice cost me. It was lonely. It required me to act with integrity in situations where no one would have blamed me for acting out of bitterness. When I drew up that promissory note, when I sent the attorney's letter, when I kept showing up to a family that consistently underestimated me, I was making daily decisions about who I wanted to be, not just what I wanted to have. That's the part that mattered most, not the hotel, not the numbers, but the kind of person I was becoming while I was building it, someone who kept her word even when the other party didn't, who didn't confuse being overlooked with being worth less, who refused to let the smallness of someone else's vision become the ceiling of her own life. I also had to be smart, not just technically. Though the index funds and the feasibility study and the 6 weeks of running numbers were all real and all necessary. I mean smart in the way that's really about paying attention, about noticing what was actually happening versus what I wished were happening, about learning to read systems, financial ones, yes, but also family ones, and understanding where I fit and where I didn't and what I could actually change. Wisdom isn't something you have, it's something you practice, one decision at a time, often alone, often without anyone telling you you're on the right track. And then there's the piece that I think gets left out of these kinds of stories the most: the endurance, the sheer, unglamorous persistence of continuing to move forward when there is no signal that it's working. Every 6 a.m. call with the contractor, every spreadsheet revised at midnight, every holiday where I sat at that table and smiled and went home and kept going anyway. That was the part no one saw. That was also the part no one could take away. Jade got a beautiful wedding. My parents were proud. The room was full and warm, and the band played something slow near the end of the night. And I drove home in the quiet, and the quiet was mine. That's the thing about building a life on your own terms. By the time other people notice, you've already stopped needing them to.